Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Procrastinator's Pitstop. I am sitting with another amazing guest for you here today. We are sitting here with Laura Berman Fortgang. Laura is an award-winning coach, best-selling author, and international speaker known for her Now What career clarity method, with a TEDx talk reaching over 2 million views and a legacy of empowering individuals and companies worldwide. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We have a lot of interesting ground that we're going to cover today. But before we dive into it, we do like to have an icebreaker on the show. And the question for you today is, which cartoon character do you resonate with the most and why?
Well, ever since I got these glasses, I resonate with Edna Mode from The Incredibles. Maybe not the most flattering to me, but I like what she's about. No nonsense, very direct, and sees the potential in people. So that's me.
I like that. I like that reference. You know, yeah, I like that one. So just getting into it, softly here, and ease into it. How would you define procrastination, Laura, and what does it mean to you personally?
Well, I define procrastination as being off your mark, just the things that you say you're going to do, you're not doing. That to me is what procrastination is. What it looks like can be, doing other tasks. It could be napping. It could be, you know, escapism through shopping. Who knows? For me, I mean, I play this game every day. Not the game of avoiding procrastination, the game of making something so doable that I don't have to procrastinate because I broke it down into a bite-sized piece and it's easy to get done. So that's how I, play with it. I love to procrastinate, but I discipline myself not to most of the time.
I love that. I love that. So, besides breaking things down, and we know there's no real, 100% cure all silver bullet, right? But is there anything else that you do personally to kind of overcome procrastination when it rears its head at you?
I mean, I try to do the hardest thing first, the thing I'm dreading the most. I try to get it done first so it's out of the way because otherwise it just eats at you. It causes you stress, it causes you anxiety. The more you avoid it, it causes you anxiety. So I find doing the most difficult thing or the thing that I'm dreading to get that done first. Then you're opened up to a lot more energy and a better shot at getting the rest of what you got to get done. So bite-sized pieces, doing the hardest thing first. And what else? I mean, I try to have some kind of reward, not a reward that's going to take me off track, but all right, so if you did everything you said, then what are you going to do for yourself today? Is it taking a break and taking a walk? Is it a particular show you want to watch in the evening? What is it that you're going to reward yourself with because you did what you said you would do? Keeping promises to yourself is really, I think, the key. If we look at, I like to use the example of losing weight just as a general example of that. We all know what to do. We all know we need to eat less and move more. And then yet there's a multi-billion-dollar industry around weight loss. So what is it? It's really keeping your word to yourself. It's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing. But that's the framework I look at it through is how do you keep your word to yourself? Because that's the most important person to keep your word to.
I really love that you bring that up too. The discipline. It's not even really discipline. It's keeping your word to yourself, right? And I think we've lost that a lot today. Um, you know,
Yeah, I mean, it's about integrity. What does integrity mean to you? Integrity can mean the truth, but it also can mean being whole. Like when something's whole, it's integrous, right? So it doesn't have any fissures or cracks in it. And that's another way that I like to use it as a perspective is like, all right, so the wholeness of keeping your word, the wholeness of, it's not how much you worked out or how well you ate that day or did you write enough words for your novel that you're putting together, but it's, can you feel whole because you didn't cause a fissure? And I love that word. I'm not even sure how to spell it. A crack in your integrity. And so we want to build any house or any structure on a strong foundation and not have it any cracks in it.
I like that analogy. And I think it's funny that you mentioned around these different things. And I wanted to ask your perspective on this. Discipline is great when kind of motivation falls through. And I've had this discussion with quite a few different people, and So, in your mind, what is it that makes people lose that motivation? Because for me, in my mind, when you want to lose weight, you know what you need to do. It's that whatever was driving you before has sort of gone away. And a lot of times I find that that's more of a fear based notion than sort of a joy based notion, right? Because the things that are joy based, we don't tend to drop as quickly as those things where we have those fear based. Fear based being example for the exercise. I want to go to the gym and lose weight. Why? I want to look good. Why? Beach season's coming. Okay, so I want to go to the beach and look good. Okay, why? I want people to notice me. Why? Well, I don't want to die alone. Boom. Right. And so, beach season comes and they get, down to their beach body where they're accepting of it. And then the rest sort of goes by the wayside. Right. So it's that sort of, I don't want to say it's like a negative connotation, but the motivation sort of goes away. What's your take on that?
Well, I think the motivation goes away when we don't get what we want. So if you go with the beach body idea and that's supposed to get you love, so if it did end up bringing you a summer romance, then was it worth not doing? So I think we need to be more internally motivated than externally driven, right? So that's an external drive. Like I want to look good because I want to find a significant other. So how about I want to feel good and look good because I want to feel good. And yes, I'll still take the steps to be social and get out there and try to meet people, but I want to feel good in my own skin. Do it for you because I think that when we do it for something else outside of us and that doesn't work out, we lose our motivation altogether. I'm lecturing myself as I talk to you.
No, it's really that ugly question though, I tend to not go there even myself, like when I'm talking to people and trying to guide them through different things. The bottom line really is, why is it that we can hold ourselves accountable and do things externally, but when it's internal, we all of a sudden just don't or are not able to do that, right? Do you think it's societal or do you think it's more just something that we learn to do?
Yeah, I mean, outside pressure and external validation can be a huge motivator. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but if I were to take an amateur's guess at it, we want the approval of our mommy and daddy, so we're always looking for that external approval. But I think part of maturity is evolving to get that approval from yourself. And the more you're looking for your own approval, the more likely you are to keep your word to yourself. You're not doing it for anybody else other than you. At the same time, we are socially animals and no one wants to say they're going to do something and then have everyone see that they didn't do it. So that external pressure can be validating as well. But I think if the internal drive is there, then the external drive or the external motivators is just a bonus.
Yeah, no, I like how you worded that, for sure. And it also goes back to something else as well, which I wanted to touch on as well, which was clarity, because you have this what now sort of career clarity method. One of the biggest things in procrastination, at least now that I've noticed, is just not being clear on what you're supposed to be doing or where you're supposed to go. And I presume, correct me if I'm wrong, that that's kind of why you created this method. Is that correct?
Well, the Now What program came out of people not knowing how to figure out what they want to do with their life, like career wise or, life direction wise. And that's because we were given a paper roadmap in high school, it's like, okay, what do you like and what are you good at? And that was the only guide to what you should be doing with your life. And now I'm like, throw out the paper roadmap. We have GPS, and GPS is again more internally driven of like, what do you want to contribute? What are you built to do? What do you feel passionate about? I'm not saying just follow your passions and everything will be okay. That's a myth. Sometimes your passion should just be hobbies. They can't make money at all our passions. But clarity is a motivator in itself. Like, when we feel lost, it's just an awful feeling of being rudderless. But I find that if we can name certain criteria, like especially criteria for happiness in a job, then we know what we're looking for and you can be more purposeful in your steps of what you're going for. But when we don't know what we want, we just like, sending out any job application, just seeing what lands, throwing spaghetti at the wall. It's really important to have pillars that hold up the whole foundation.
I love how you say that the pillars and holding up the foundation again. Just and this really goes back to, I don't think it's really on purpose, but it just sort of happens that way that most people don't know what they want because we get up to, I think, almost we no, we do get into adulthood pretty much being told what we want and what we want to do, right? Advertising or all these other things. Not to mention, I mean, if I ask somebody a 5-year plan right now, they sort of laugh at me because it's like, right, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I don't know, because ask somebody that in 2018, and COVID happened. So I've found that there's a lot of resistance around even creating these plans now because I don't know. It's like a collective sense of anything could happen. So why plan? How do you get around that?
Yeah, I mean, I always say not plan. Wait, let me make sure I get this right. Plan for the worst, but expect the best. So that, have a contingency plan, have a safety plan, have some money in the bank, and then forget about that and go towards what you want. I think that you're right. So many things have become unpredictable, but I think as human beings, like we need to know that we're on the road to something to feel settled and to feel okay. So we do that until we can't do that anymore. So I think it's important to, have a safety net, but at the same time be focused on a goal because we, as human beings, we need hope. So whether it's, hoping for a goal with your work or hoping for something for your family or hoping for something for the world at large, we function better when we have hope than when we're hopeless. So I'm always like, stay the course until you can't.
So stay the course, even if you aren't 100% clear on how everything's going to go, as long as you've got that sort of roadmap. Well, not roadmap, but basic points. Just keep going
Yeah,
till
I
you can't
mean,
go
it's
anymore.
like, I mean, a little corny, but that's the North Star. Like, keep following the North Star, even if you don't know if you're going to hit bumpy terrain or not. Find a way around the bumpy terrain, but keep going.
I don't know why, but when you mentioned that, the first thing that came to my mind was Peter Pan. The hope and hopelessness, right? Like if you have hope, you can fly and you can keep heading towards that star, towards morning or whatever. Whatever it was, I'm probably messing up the storyline there, but no, I really like that, and just being able to have that carry us forward as well. But you know what I'd really like to know? I'd really like to, you have such an interesting backstory. Could you give us a little bit of a glimpse into, you know, where you came from and how you got to be where you are today?
Sure. I mean, I've been a coach for 30 years. So I was one of the founding members of the International Coaching Federation and one of the early adopters of life coaching that then I turned to the executive coaching side and the business coaching side. But I came from an acting background. I mean, I wanted to be on Broadway. That was my dream out of high school. My parents wouldn't let me be a theater major, so I majored in communications. And the minute I graduated college, I moved to New York and I was an actress, a waitress, anything you could do with your clothes on, shoe model, danced at parties, again, clothes on. My mother was like, never take your clothes off. You'll end up like Vanessa Williams. It'll come back to bite you when she was Miss America. So that always stayed in my mind. Because never mind, I won't go there, but people asked. So, but before that, I grew up as a kid as an expat. I lived in Venezuela until I was 12 years old. So that really was a formative experience of living in a different culture and learning a different language and has made me a very culturally sensitive person. And I thrive on that. So I bring an interesting background to coaching. And now in all my years of coaching, I mean, I've been focused on different industries from finance to pharma, the Army Corps of Engineers. I've coached celebrities. I coach homemakers for Oprah. I've just been able to do a lot of different things. It's been a very privileged ride.
No, for sure, and coming out of Venezuela too, that probably gave you a lot of a very different view than most children would have had typically in North America.
Yeah, I mean, at the time that I lived there, Venezuela was a functioning democracy. It wasn't the mess that it is now, but there still was no middle class. It was either very rich or very poor. And that was an interesting perspective that taught me a lot as a kid. I even noticed as a kid. I understood that.
But what do you think was your biggest sort of, lesson that you had to learn about yourself as were going through your journey?
I think the biggest lesson has been that I'm enough, that my journey is unique and I bring certain things to the table that are valuable. When you're an actor, you're looking for so much external validation and you're rejected all the time. So I really had to learn A, how to deal with that, and B, finally to walk away and say, this isn't what I want for my life. There were, what I truly discovered in hindsight was that the real reason I wanted to be an actor was I would love the influence that one had from the stage, that people might see a show and be encouraged to heal something in their own life or to be inspired in some way. So it really was the making people move off the dime of their lives that interested me about the power of theater. And I found that through being on stages as a speaker and individually as a coach. So I haven't missed it. I found the real reason I wanted to do it, and that allowed me to leave because I could do that in some other form that was healthier.
I like that, but that takes a really big level of awareness that that there's many of us, and myself included. I didn't get that kind of clarity until shoot, almost I don't know, 30, right? So when did that clarity happen for you?
That was around the age that it happened. That was around the age that it happened. Like from 27 to 30, I really realized, like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? What do I really want out of this? And it wasn't, being in this grind of always having to be approved of to work. So I created my own work, and I was lucky enough to succeed at that for a good long time.
Love that. I so love that. From Venezuela back to the U.S., back to Oprah, back to training celebrity, coaching celebrities. So much success. What would you say was your biggest challenge that you had to overcome in all that?
I mean, being in business for yourself is always a challenge. I tease that if you want personal growth, start a business. You're constantly being challenged to keep it going, to not make it mean anything humongous if you have a setback of some kind, always looking for new opportunities. So it's a constant.
And for you personally, and the constant growth. I mean, we're talking about personal development. Do you think it's the biggest one for you? What was the biggest one for you in that? Just those setbacks, or
I'm just, trying to stay forward focused and not get hung up on something that happened in the past. Like I said, any setback or disappointment doesn't have to be permanent. You keep on picking yourself up and you keep going time after time. And I think I got that resilience from my acting days, but it's much easier in this version. It's not as harsh and it's not about things that are so out of my control. When you're an actor and you're too short, what are you going to do about being too short for a role? Or what are you going to do about, you know, they want some other kind of voice? There's nothing you can do about that. But if you do something that doesn't go well in business, you can learn from it and hopefully correct it and never deal with it again.
yes, that is something that we always hope for is to have the turnkey system set up, and although the world doesn't quite work like that. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about today specifically, and when we're talking clarity and we're talking moving forward, is technology, right? I find it's like a double-edged sword. It can either cause us to pause and not do anything entirely, or it can move us forward. What's your experience been that in the career world?
I think that if it causes you to stop altogether, that talk about being fear based, that's fear based. I mean, I remember like my dad was fired after 32 years in the same company because he thought computers were a fad and he didn't need to learn them. And then he became obsolete, right? So we have to stay current. We have to respect technology. If we're stopped by it, we're going to get stopped in a bigger way by becoming irrelevant. So we have to keep up with it. Hopefully it won't be replacing what you or I do anytime soon, and we can keep going.
It's funny you say. I've been testing out some of those apps and things that they have the virtual coaching, and it's. I mean, I guess it all depends on what you're used to, right? So the new generation coming up and is used to talking to ChatGPT like a therapist, which is totally foreign to myself and yourself probably, but I mean, this is what they're growing up with. So I don't see it replacing the human connection, but I do think that we're on a slippery slope where we have to, hammer in that human connection is important.
Yeah, I mean, when you just say young people who sit next to each other on a couch and they text each other instead of talking to each other, they are kind of growing up without valuing that human connection. But it'll be interesting to see. I think there's a high cost to that too. We see suicide rates up. We see breakdowns for kids, and I mean that's sad. That shouldn't be a time in life when you're heavily troubled, and yet maybe it's the lack of human connection that feeds that.
You know, you said that, where kids are on their phone all the time, and my brother said something interesting to me, um, back in 2006, 2005, 2006. Don't remember exactly when. He said that, well, it's no wonder, and he said this back then. He said it's no wonder people are like overwhelmed and stressed and sad and depressed. It's because when you look at the amount of information we need to process on a daily basis, and this was going back, what are we talking about? Almost 20 years now. How many small things we have to know and deal with that we didn't have to 50 years ago, 60 years ago. Do you think that the amount of information is what's overwhelming to us, or do you think it's the way in which it's given to us more?
I think it's a lack of having a filter. Like, if people, you're on TikTok for 3 hours, like, what did you really learn? What are you taking in? If you have a filter for yourself, or you even put it on your app, I don't know if you can, but to say, I only care about X topic, or I want to, just see fun videos for the next hour, or whatever the case may be. Like, if we have our own filters, we can keep out a lot of the noise. And a lot of it is noise. And I think we have to make choices, and it's back to your values, back to those pillars that I was talking about. How do you decide what's important, what needs to be paid attention to, and what you can just let go of? But it is a barrage of information. I mean, I was just talking to a teacher 2 nights ago who was saying that, like, they take away the phones at this school, but these kids can't sit 3 minutes without having something to do. Like, they cannot just be with themselves. And I think that's a big missing for mental health, is that you should be able to be with yourself with nothing to do for a few minutes. You'll be okay. But that's been squeezed out of how kids behave now. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of grown-ups they become.
I'd be interested to know it. Just for information's sake, what age level were those kids?
High school.
Yeah, I think that's probably the last sort of generation you're gonna be able to get away with that. I mean, just adjacently, there's lots of work in addictions and things, and these kids, it's like when you take away their phone, you're literally cutting off an appendage, and not sure what we're gonna do about that, but it's just something
Yeah, it's an
of note.
addiction. It's no doubt an addiction. And they're just can't live without it. It's sad.
And how do you think that is involved in clarity? And when people are asking what, like now what in your program, is it normally clarity around their pillars? Is it clarity around what they can do for their money, or is it more based around their values?
Well, it's clarity around, what should they do? Should they be a teacher, an analyst, a IT person? But the pillars are the guide to what adds up to the direction. But people who spend no time with themselves are missing one of the biggest rudders, which is your own gut and your own intuition. And if you cannot be still, you cannot hear that. So that's part of, what I do with people is, I mean, I don't have them meditating every day. Some of them do if they're ready for that. But it's really like, how do you know you? If you know who you are and what you want, it's so much easier to have clarity. But most people just have no clue, what they even care about other than the approval of what's in their immediate surroundings, i.e., friends, or finding a significant other, or something that says, I'm okay, I'm okay. How do we find out that we're okay all by ourselves? It's, being settled, regulating your nervous system, being able to sit still and, maybe journal to figure out, who am I and what do I want? But, as I tell my clients when we enter doing the Now What program, it's like we spend the first 5 sessions navel gazing I mean that funny, like, not literally navel gazing, but trying to come up with those pillars and getting to know yourself. So we're not, sending out resumes or doing the external pieces of it. We're trying to figure out who you are, what do you want, where's your sweet spot? What do you care about? What's the kind of culture you want to work in? And then from there, we start putting together a list of what are the possible careers that could fit you and which ones are you willing to do the work that it'll take to break into them. So it starts out, ethereal, and then it gets more concrete, is what I meant by navel gazing.
Okay. Yeah, I was sort of imagining, staring at your belly button for an hour. What comes out of that? Actually, more might come out of that than you might think, but I'm not going to test it right now. But um, you touched on something there that was really interesting too. You want to have a company that has kind of the same values as you, and you want to work for a place that recognizes that. But how do you actually find that without actually working for the company first? Because I got to tell you, like I've worked with a few companies that they said one thing and their culture was completely different.
Yeah, I mean, one of a question that you can ask in an interview, especially towards the end of an interview, is to ask, what would success in this role look like in the next 90 days? Or what would you be looking for from me in the first 90 days to know that we're on the right track? And you'll get a sense of the culture because they'll have to answer, what their expectations are or what they're looking for in you. And that's a good indicator of, like, are they going to grind you down to a pebble, or is this going to be a supportive environment? So that's one way to get a hint at the culture without flat out saying, what's the culture here? Because no one will answer that truthfully.
I like that, the behavioral type of question. I like that. Just getting in the door can be difficult though, right? Do you when you speak to your clients, do you talk around resumes and how to do them, or is it more about finding somebody in those companies that uh, you know, actually works there and can open doors for you? Which do you think is more important?
I mean, my expertise is really figuring out what you want to do, but I have general awareness of what it takes to do the job search portion, and unfortunately, because of how much AI is used to track your resume, um, networking is still the best way to go of trying to get a warm lead into a company, somebody that you know, or somebody that works at a company who knows somebody you know. Otherwise, you're just up against the tracking system, and that can be so cold, and not always accurate. Not always the best people get seen for the job.
I love the insights and the conversation so far, Laura. Just being respectful of time. We are coming up pretty close to it. Is there anything that you wish I would have asked but didn't ask, or anything that you'd like to cover that we didn't cover?
Let's see. Well, just as I mean, we're going to have in the show notes for our listeners today a quick guide to clarity. So some of these questions that I've been bringing up, or what are those questions that she's talking about? Well, you'll have that as a free download from the show notes. So go look for that. And when we talk about those pillars, it's getting your needs met, it's your values, it's knowing what kind of boss you respond to, what kind of atmosphere you do well in. Are you someone who likes a lot of autonomy? Do you like a lot of guidance? So we really do go pretty deep on figuring out I call it your criteria for happiness. What are the elements that are going to be part of a package that makes you happy to be in a job? And I always tell people that career satisfaction doesn't come from what you do, it comes from who your job allows you to be. So it's not just the tasks that you do, but it's, does your job allow you to be who you want to be? Do you get to be a helpful person? Do you get to be a smart person? Do you get to be um a problem solver? So it's who you get to be that brings you the satisfaction, not the daily tasks.
That's such a powerful note right there. It's who you get to be, or who you get to be at the job. Because you're right. I mean, if you're not happy in your job and you get a raise, you're still not going to be happy in the job.
Right. So it's not the job itself. You know what I mean? Like, do you love making the widgets, or do you love that, the widgets, you meet people on the street who love your widgets. So it brings you satisfaction knowing that you are doing something useful. So it's who your job allows you to be, someone who creates something useful. But if you're in a job that you dislike, or you're in a toxic environment, no amount of reward is going to make it better. And that's the part that people don't want to hear.
Yeah, I've personally been there. I'm sure others have too. Being in a soul-sucking job they didn't agree with, and they actually got a raise and found out they still didn't want to be there. So it's weird. And I know there's people out there that are saying, "No, you're crazy. If you offered me, double my salary right now, I'd be happy as whatever, right?" Like, okay, see if that happens. Call me in 6 months. I'm genuinely curious to see if that fixed it.
Right. You feel good for a couple of months, but then it'll all come back and it'll just be just the same.
Well, Laura, it's been great. It's been a great conversation. To all listeners, we are going to have those in the show notes. Just before we go, though, is there what's the best way to reach out to you, Laura? If people have questions.
If you can remember my name, you will find me, my website, and you can email me through there. So laurabermanfortgang.com.
Excellent. Well, Laura, again, thank you so much for being on the show today. A lot of great insights. Really loved it. To all our listeners, thank you once again for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find that motivation or inspiration for yourself today, maybe just go out and try to be that motivation and inspiration for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.
Thanks, Chris.